Hello and welcome to a particularly star-studded episode of The Hub on Vital MX, where we have more than 10 updates all pertaining to high-profile athletes from around the world. We'll start with Pro Motocross and then move into Europe, the Middle East and eventually Australia. So we're going to go on a real worldwide trip in the next 10 minutes or so, hopefully a little less. First off, you all saw Aaron Plessinger withdraw from the second moto at Redbud because of a sickness. Now, I've heard murmurs of Epstein-Barr or something of the sort, and what he posted on his social media hasn't done much to quell my concerns. He said,
"Yeah, I think I've been dealing with a little bit of a sickness that I tried to keep telling myself that wasn't happening, and finally caught up to me."
Now, personally, I don't believe you use those words if you've come down with the common flu. So let's keep an eye on Plessinger moving forward, see if his performances fluctuate a little more dramatically. Perhaps his status could change, but as of now, he is in for Millville and the remainder of the outdoor series. Of course, anything can happen and change, as we saw with his teammate, Julien Beaumer, who has now withdrawn from both Millville and Washougal. Those of you with a keen memory will remember that Juju went down hard at High Point, and he hasn't been the same since, even in practice. So now, KTM, noticing that there are some lingering health issues since that crash, have decided to pull him out.
The doctors yesterday, and unfortunately I'm still suffering from some lingering effects from the crash I sustained in High Point, and the doctor advised me that it's best that I take a couple weekends off.
I know some media colleagues have gotten reports that he too is dealing with some sort of sickness or illness, but then in my press day discussion with him at Redbud, he randomly dropped that he sustained a hand injury in that High Point crash. So I don't know if the withdrawal is to do with a sickness or a hand injury, because the PR was rather vague. Maybe a combination of both, seeing as both of those theories exist within the paddock. Now, unfortunately, sticking with the illness theme, Seth Hammaker revealed that he's been dealing with an autoimmune disease issue for a while, and the longer format races and heat are very exhausting on top of it. Seth said that he is trying to manage it and figure it out currently, but he's going to drop back to just one day of riding a week to see if that helps his energy levels. Not great for Hammaker, of course, but he hasn't done a full season like this in some time, especially with the toll of being a championship contender in Supercross. So it's almost understandable that this is taking it out of him, but you would think it would be quite beneficial for him to see the season out just to get those reps under his belt. And sticking in the Kawasaki wing, Jason Anderson said he had to pull off early at Redbud because he still wasn't feeling 100%. He said he's still having issues with his health and needs to check on that to see how everything is and then make a plan from there. Now, I'm not sure if that's issues with his health from Southwick, of course he was very sick there, or if this goes back further to what caused him to withdraw from the end of Supercross. I would think Southwick, because it is unusual to have some sort of stomach virus that extends into Redbud. But we'll see how he performs at Millville and whether there's a sign of life there. Finally, in Pro Motocross news, Cooper Webb will miss the remainder of the outdoor season as he must undergo surgery on his knee on Monday, July the 12th. He tagged it on the final lap of qualification at Redbud and was concerned, had scans on the Monday just gone, and it's not great news, although it hasn't been specified what the injury is. It has been said he will certainly make it back for the first SMX playoff in September, so perhaps we can presume some meniscus damage or something of the sort. What this does mean is that Cooper Webb will lose out on his top seed in 450 SMX. That will likely end up being Justin Cooper. And looking at the points now, if Jet, Chase, Hunter, Eli continue to race without issue, I would think that Webb will be seeded into 450 SMX around 7th place. A top 5 spot certainly appears unlikely, but time will tell. Now, moving to MXGP, of course, it was reported last week that Jeffrey Herlings broke his collarbone, and he's actually provided quite a lot of information now, saying that it was a nice break that didn't require surgery, so he hasn't had that. Obviously, as he said, when you don't put a plate in, it's going to take a little bit longer to recover. But in his words, man, I just hate surgery, so I didn't want to take one, and the goal is to be back on the bike somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks, which would mean that he won't race at either Lockett or Lommel, I would think. Now, maybe the recovery can be sped up and he can make it to Lommel, but Lockett certainly appears to be off the cards, and maybe that's good considering his checkered past with the Czech venue, if you'll pardon the pun. In other news, Tim Geiser is very close to getting back on a bike, which makes me think that he is going to be able to race the final 4 or 5 GPs with Honda HRC. Now, will those be his final GPs ever with Honda HRC? I want to say yes. Everything is certainly leaning in that direction, but time will tell. The MXGP market is quite simply horrendous at the moment. There are riders talking to every team, and no one knows what is going to happen, even though we are now deep into July. On to the Middle East, and 2 fan favourites and YouTube stars, you could say, went down hard at the Arena Cross Tour World Finals. Tommy Searle had a horrific crash, quite scary to be honest, and he left with fractures to a couple of vertebrae. Now, considering the magnitude of the crash, how bad it could have been, you could argue that he's quite lucky to escape with an injury such as that, but of course it's still not ideal, especially when he's leading the MX2 British Championship. From what I know, this injury is very similar to the one he sustained in Thailand in 2015. Those of you that remember, as a Red Bull KTM rider at the time, he had a horrendous crash over the finish jump and actually fell kind of similarly to how he did in Abu Dhabi, so it would make sense. And then a couple of laps later, Dean Wilson went down very hard himself, but as far as he's concerned, he said that he's really beat up, but it doesn't sound like there is a significant injury there or anything to note. So we wish Tommy and Dean well. The Arena Cross World Tour was eventually won by Adrien Escoffier, a recognisable French name. He always appears at Paris, the French SX Tour, etc., etc. And he's one of the riders who is benefiting from both WSX and now the Arena Cross World Tour. Who would have thought that we would ever have that? Now, a couple of notes for you to support good causes. If you text 785833 with the word super, then you will get a special edition Love Moto Stop Cancer t-shirt in support of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. They launched a special design in honour of Redbud and Independence Day, July the 4th, all of that. So you can get a new look whilst also supporting a great cause alongside the SMX World Championship. Of course, all that the SMX League does for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital is quite remarkable. So why not contribute to the cause yourself and be a part of history? And in a similar fashion, in honour of the late Aidan Zing, AZ39forever.com has been launched, and you can buy Aidan Zing merch, etc. on there to support the family and just keep Aidan Zing's legacy alive. You would have seen that link in various places online as everyone rallies behind everyone who loved and cared about Aidan Zing. And there's t-shirt, hats, butt patches and sticker sheets available on that website. And I believe if you get on there quick, you can even get the merch in time for Loretta Lynn's. So consider either one of those options. If you could support both, that would be great. But even one, no matter how small or insignificant your input may seem, every little helps. The final note on this week's episode of The Hub comes from Australia. As mentioned, we were going to travel from one side of the world to the other, and Jed Beaton went 1-1 at the latest round of Pro MX and extended his MX1 championship lead to 29 points with, I believe, 2 rounds remaining from memory. Now, this is really quite interesting because Jed Beaton should steal the MX1 title from Kyle Webster, winning his first title in Australia since he returned from MXGP. But secondly, Beaton and Webster are vying for the second spot on Team Australia. So, with Beaton now looking very, very good to win the MX1 title, is he going to bump Webster out when Webster did so well last year and Webster has the benefit of Honda HRC support and the like. It's interesting, and I could see it getting a little bit political, because if you're looking at it purely from a competitive point of view, if Beaton wins, I think you have to send Beaton. And I'm sure that perhaps he could get a Star Yamaha. Star Yamaha have helped much lesser riders at the Nations over the years, admittedly for a fee. But again, I could see it getting political, and maybe the fact that Webster can integrate into the Honda HRC family alongside the Lawrences sees him get the nod. I think Team Australia are going to make a decision between the two quite soon, from what I hear. So stay tuned for that. Of course, you'll hear about that on the Hub. Thank you for watching and listening. We tried to get through this as swiftly as possible. So much to unpack, but we appreciate you sticking with us over the 10 minutes of coverage and coming back every single Thursday to catch up on everything that has happened in the world of motocross.